The Peacock Angel by E.S. Drower being some account of the votaries of a secret cult and their sanctuaries. Chapter 16, Shaikh, the temple precincts. A right holy precinct runs round it, and a ceaseless stream that falleth from the rocks on every side is green, with laurels and myrtles and fragrant cypress. Theocritus, epigram 4. According to a Muslim tradition, Shaikh bin Musafir, who died in the odor of sanctity at a great age, somewhere about the year 1163 of the Common Era, adopted as a retreat for himself and his disciples a Christian monastery at Lalesh in the Hakkari Mountains, that is to say, in the valley where his reputed tomb is shown today. And indeed, the place suggests a medieval abbey, and the atmosphere is wholly cloistral. 3 white nuns, turbaned and wimpled, spotless from head to foot, complete the illusion. They move silently as disembodied spirits, visiting the shrines, or else sit plying their spindles, twisting either the white lamb's wool into yarn for their mantles, or white cotton into lamp wicks. Every morning I saw the abbess and her novice setting out in single file on a pilgrimage round the many shrines, devoutly kissing the stones as they passed on their barefoot way. As they returned one day in the early sunlight, I noticed that the young novice had gathered a bunch of scarlet ranunculus and set it in her white turban, as though she thought still of the spring feast, the wild dance of the Devka, and the delights she had forsworn forever. And let's remember that 4750 BCE is the start date of the Yazidi calendar. Their mythology goes before that, but they're starting from the point of the peacock incarnation. The program of their day was governed by the sun. To the sun they turned to pray, and the image of the life-giving orb is graven everywhere on the shrines. Well, very specifically, they use 21 as a symbol, because 21, you take the sun, moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and you use that as a representative, and you draw a path, each one connecting to all the others. You have 21 paths. Shaikh was born towards the end of the 11th century at Baalbek in Syria, within sight of the mighty ruins which had once held a shrine to the sun god. He probably visited the vast temple of the sun god at Tadmor, then still almost intact. Often must he have passed beneath the portal of the temple of Bacchus at Baalbek, upon which poppies and wheat are sculptured with such tender and gracious skill, preaching the silent text that death is but a sleep and a forgetting, and that life that is dormant must again, like the corn, press forward to the light. Such memories did the mystic bring with him when he came to this sheltered place of peace, where the rigors of winter are softened and spring lingers long. Nothing that is known about him speaks of anything but orthodoxy, but he was a Sufi, and the secret doctrines of Sufism have always been suspected of pantheism, and the Sufi sects of cherishing ancient faiths. Well, Islam itself allows us to seek the knowledge around the world. But Sufism kind of tries to blend things into Islam. It has the revelation and inspiration that came through Muhammad as part of it. So it's hard, you can't say somebody is a Sufi, they're a Muslim. Well, find out more, right? It is certain that the successors of his brotherhood, the Adawiya, were roundly accused of pantheism and heathenism. Well, heathenism, what was that even supposed to mean, right? And that it may be that Buddhist missionaries passing over the Silk Road through Persia and the Middle East gained in the course of centuries secret adherents amongst the religious seekers to the doctrines of reincarnation. For not only the Yazidis, but the Druzes believe that life on earth is many times repeated. Well, actually, we see remnants that indicate belief in reincarnation before the areas which the Hindus and Buddhists would later inhabit. Before the Greeks, tens of thousands of years, we see indication amongst the people that we now call Yazidi about that. But, this is talking about the theory that this started as a Sufi order. It was just cemented as with a public image under that. Jadon, who took off his shoes the instant he passed the entrance to the valley and went barefoot the whole time of our stay, went at once into the temple, our church, first prostrating himself, kissing the stones and doorway, and standing a while in silent prayer. Then he placed his offering on the threshold stone near the relief of the black serpent. This retains its jet blackness by being rubbed with a mixture of olive oil and the black obtained from the smoke of the sacred lamps. To their surprise, I did not immediately visit this most important of all the shrines and paid my respect to Sheikh Ada's tomb. I had explored it on 2 previous occasions, and this time proposed to enter it on the last day of my stay. It is well to keep the best to last, I told the fakir. I contented myself, therefore, with examining the building on the outside. It has obviously been rebuilt several times. Not only Muslim, but Christian tradition claims that it was once the church of a monastery, and that it is probable that this, in turn, was built on the site of an ethnic shrine. I'll say ethnic instead of pagan, because pagan and heathen and Gentile don't really mean anything as religious terms in their common use. For this valley visited by the first sun and murmurous with many springs must have been sacred since very early times. Yeah, despite the newer stuff built on it, there's actually remnants of stuff much, much older. I forget exactly how much older, but it does go back even earlier than what you see in Syria and stuff of what you could be called Yazidi culture. To reach the temple, let us therefore call it a temple, one must cross the stone-paved forecourt with arched recesses on either side, which I describe in the last chamber. I pass under a short vaulted way with benches on either side, for lying or sitting, and thence descend steps into the court of the temple itself, also paved with gray stone. When the door of the temple is open, one can see directly from this archway across the court into the interior. Within the deep gloom is faintly illuminated by the steady light of an olive lamp. The courtyard is fairly large. The archway described above, which admits to it, is in its northwest corner and exactly the opposite the temple door, guarded by the famous black snake on its upright at the right of the portal. The temple occupies all the west side of the court, and on the large stone wall blocks are inscriptions and carvings in sunk relief, or rather incisions, some of them obliterated, others clear. In the south wall of the court, there are chambers. One for storing the sacred bread is protected by a curious representation above the door of lions facing each other with open jaws on a background of dentated ornament. They threw open the door of this room, but I did not enter, for the floor was strewn with bread, and in Iraq it is a sin to tread upon bread, which is looked upon as God's especial provision for the life of man. They were pleased at the reason I gave for not going in. Now, Christianity teaches that it's some sort of blasphemy. Now, on the right side, as you enter the court, that archway is the lump of a snake statue. It kind of goes to the right and to the left. and to the right, left, the right, a little bit more, and still a little bit more to the left, and then it goes up towards the bent, and then it's sort of straight, but it's going to the right again, and then you have it go a little bit up, and it looks like it has a bit of a tongue sticking towards the left, but it's on the left of the people on the inside, which that can give some indication too. Steps and an archway at the western end of the south wall led sharply round to the left and down to the lower courtyard where the fakir lives with his family and guests are entertained. Off these steps to a door leads the private apartments of the white ladies to an upper room and a terrace upon which I saw the aged nun spinning. The masonry of most of the whole complex of buildings is of an unmortared stone, shaped square or oblong, fairly even and held in place by its own weight. The blocks of stone are massive, but not of unusual size. An average block is a foot or two in length and a foot or more in breadth, though the size varies considerably, some being far larger trees and some smaller. In the interstices of the stones are plants and herbs. Between the paving stones of the temple court, daisies and small scented irises grow freely. The principal motives of ornamentation on the walls and on most of the shrines in the valley are the sun, the moon, crescent and full, stars, the 6-rayed and 5-rayed being the most common, conventional flowers, the gopal or hooked stick of the Shaikh, and the comb said to be symbolic of the long hair and beard of the qawwals and sheikhs. I noticed that, contrary to what I had heard, no Yazidi had the slightest objection to pronouncing the word misht, comb, and although once, when I asked Deya Kota, the Kabanna, what the carving on the wall represented, and she made the gesture of combing the hair, it was simply because she did not know the Arabic word. On the western face of the temple, in the lunette above the door, there is a portrayal of the flaming disk of the sun, the disk enclosing a crescent moon and a 5-rayed star, flanked on either side by inscriptions in Arabic recording the names of donors who have repaired or rebuilt the place. Most of the inscriptions in the valley, some of which are broken or upside down, commemorate the names of those who have rebuilt a shrine. Otherwise, they are not communicative. The gopal is portrayed in other forms beside the simple crook, resembling an ordinary walking stick. The crook is sometimes brought round so as to enclose a sun disk. On another stone, the stick ends in a crescent, in the bow of which a 6-rayed star is carved. A 7-spiked irregular object at the end of a stick was described by the fakir as a gur geza, or mace. A defaced and primitive lion stands beside it. On another stone, on the temple face, is a 5-stopped pipe. The shabab of the qawwals, and near it an object was declared to be a tefkir, i.e., a perforated ladle for burgul, though to me it looked like a sun-ended staff. A great black snake was not so jetty as on former visits, and badly needed a fresh coat of lamp black. Beside the snake stone are 2 objects, which they pronounced to be a mace and spoon. Nowhere on any of the shrines did I see a human figure. As I was waiting for Jadon to come out of the temple, I noticed a large, dirty white scorpion, which Haji called a dupishk, literal sing, in the hollow of a carving on the left side of the door. He knocked it out, being careful not to kill it, and pinned it with a stick to the pavement while it reared its tail over its back, attacking the stick repeatedly, upon which a wet patch of poison appeared. Haji explained that no creature must be killed in this holy place, and when a second stick was found, the scorpion was pinched between the 2 and removed to some spot less sacred for execution. And said he, returning after the deed had been done. Wallah, there were 100 little ones within her. Had anyone been stung, he had but to repair to the mazar of Abu Akrabe. Dust from the shrine, Hajjah assured me, would cure any scorpion bite if placed at once on the wound. And he took me to see it. Well, certainly not going to try anything like that. There's one, don't want to get bit, because one hears it hurts regardless. Two, not chancing it, that being not being enough, right? It stood on the hillside, which rises sheer on the north side of the temple. There are sometimes peculiar chemical compositions of the water or earth in places like this. The hillside, which rises sheer on the north side of the temple, together with a number of other shrines and small shelters for pilgrims, built of stone and doorless, looking themselves like natural features of the landscape, lodged as they are on the terrace slopes between rocks and grassy patches, sweet with wild flowers. Close to the scorpion Shaikh is the more pretentious shrine of Sheikh Abdul Qadir, not, I suppose, the saint of that name whose mosque in Baghdad is a place of pilgrimage for Sunnah all over the world. Well, Islam forbids pilgrimage except to 3 places. Some narrations say 4, Mecca, Medina, Jerusalem, and some say Damascus is a place. Now, you can make historical visitations, but that's not the same thing. Although that great Sufi mystic was the contemporary and friend of Sheikh Adda, the Sheikh Abdul Qadir was one of the companions of Sheikh Adda. Of the other, the more famous Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, a Yazidi, told me years ago that there was such a communion between his spirit and that of Sheikh Adda bin Musafir, that if the latter stood in a circle traced by pious magic, he could converse with his friend in Baghdad, just as you talk to each other with wireless. The mazar is decorated by a representation of the sun, the inner disk of which contains 13 petals or rays. Just below the shrine of Abdul Qadir and close to the northern wall of the temple grows an old terebinth tree, and pilgrims believe that its leaves placed on the eye will heal them and cure discharge from them. The edifices of the northern wall on its outer face are filled with chips of stone and small pebbles. Now, there's sort of a mystery entailed in the number 13, right? Not just the 13 until the full, until the full moon, the 13th, 14th, and 15th of the lunar month, or the full moon days and stuff like that, are the 1 over the 12. There's other things associated with the number 13. And no, Ophiuchus is not the 13th zodiac sign. It was always one of the decans, in that way of thinking. Or, yeah. Mazar's decorated representation of the sun, and release 13 rays just below the shrine of Abdul Qadir and close to the northern wall of the temple grows old male terebinth tree, and pilgrims believe its leaves placed on the eye will heal them and discharge them from the interstices filled with cups of stones and small pebbles. Well, in some areas, people know the various things of different plants and different earth and stuff like this, and what it's going to do or not do. If pilgrims place a stone here, Hajjah informed us, for Jadon had rejoined me, and believe the wish of their hearts will come to pass. Jadon at once picked up a stone and put it in, and I followed suit. Must the wish be secret? I asked. No, it is permitted to tell the wish. What was yours, Khatun? I told them that I had wished for a speedy end to the war, and they chorused deeply. A good wish, by Allah, a good wish. Behind the south wall of the temple, as said above, are the quarters of the Knas, But between these and the temple runs a semi-subterranean passage, below which a wide stone aqueduct conveys a rushing stream downhill. At intervals, the paving of the passage is interspaced with square openings showing the water running smoothly below. I followed this passage and came to a door opening on to yet another courtyard behind the temple. Here, the water dives below again, except where, at one spot, the torrent has been unroofed for drinking and washing purposes. Stacked against a wall here is a vast heap of oak logs, and kept here for roasting the flesh of the sacrificial bull at the time of the big autumn feast. And this bull, which I had hitherto understood to be white, may be, the fakir told me, of any color and is often black. The bull is led round the shrine of Shaikh Shems in procession with flowers on its head, and slaughtered just below that shrine, so that it is clearly a form of sun sacrifice. Now, the ancient Persians had the sun bull and the moon bull myths. Remember Hammurabi, or Hatnurabi as he was called, that was something going on there. Now, the black bull in the Celts also has mythological significance, not just the fact that the cow is being brought to that part of Europe by people. When the beast's throat is cut with a sacrificial knife, the donor of the bull spreads his cloak so that some of the blood may be sprinkled upon it. For this brings a barakah, a blessing, upon him and his. This information I had from Yazidis, but the fakir denied the cloak, and when asked what was said when the bull was slaughtered, replied nothing but in the name of God. This is obviously untrue, and I know that if I am to find out what happens at this most interesting ceremony, I must witness it myself. And again, there's idea of a black bull as an incarnation, and or an incarnation that interacts with the black bull. Following round to the east of the building and passing a large mulberry tree, I saw water gushing out below rock and masonry in a waterfall. This may be the outlet to the spring Zemzem, described by Gertrude Bell and Dr. Wigram as passing through the cavern. Zemzem is a term that does have magical significance, but it may just be a translation over from the Zemzem water of Mecca. That myth, but beneath the temple, although I was unable to verify this, a second mulberry tree grew here, and steps lead up to a large vaulted chamber used as a dormitory by women pilgrims during the Great Autumn Feast. In the eastern wall of this chamber is a hole, and it is believed that if a person standing some 15 feet away extends his arms and hands before him, shuts his eyes, and pacing forward blindly, succeeds thrice, running in, thrusting his fingertips into the cavity without touching the wall itself, he will gain a secret wish. Of course, we tried, and of course, did not succeed. The wishes of one's heart are not so easily to come by. It was growing late, and I returned by way of the temple courtyard. In it is a cistern of running water, in which wooden bowls, kafak, float, and peering into it, I discerned in the clear water one of the black and yellow newts, peculiar to the waters of the Holy Valley. These, which when full grown are some 7 or 8 inches long, and are looked upon as sacred and never killed. With such vivid coloring, the creatures should be poisonous, but they assured me they were not. Well, the Bible talks about taking up serpents and poison and stuff like this, and if your faith's strong enough, other groups have that sort of thing going on with them too. And as the guy earlier that got, needed treatment, he said, "Oh, I'm immune," and he's falling down. I bade Hodja and his uncle good night, and returned alone through the darkening courtyards, and reached my lodging above the noisy water. I heard its never ceasing voice whenever I woke that night. Otherwise, there was a deep silence. Even by day, the bleating of goat or sheep is never heard in the valley. mar the lowing of cattle. It is a sanctuary for squirrels and birds, above the rush of the water hurrying along its paved path. I sometimes heard one cool musical call, like a pearl dropped into the night, or a single note from a koala's flute. I asked what it was one evening, and they answered that it was a bird called Totoi. The nightingale, too, they said, sings at night, but he has not yet come to these uplands.